Hello, this is Frank Records from Intigent. I'll be working through the strategy section of Project Online, looking for the portfolio analysis explanation. And we'll be walking through each of the sections that will need to be developed before the portfolio analysis can be done. So to start with, going into a Project Online environment where you can see all of the standard plus a few new items that Intigent has added to our demo environment. And today we're going to look down at the strategy section, and the first thing that everyone needs to do is look at the driver library. And in developing a driver, these are the types of things that you will see that companies do as their primary goals for the company. For example, expanding into new markets, improving customer sat, increasing market share, reducing expenses. Typically, there are usually somewhere between 4 and 8 drivers decided by a client. And so based on that, pick the ones that are most important to you all. And I'm going to go look at this one and show you what it looks like, the expand into new markets and segments. And you'll notice here that you can select departments to go into, whether this particular item driver is an active one or whether or not you might want to inactivate this driver. There are impact statements on this driver, and keeping in mind that the idea of a driver is something that you will score your projects by. So in this case, you're seeing that there are 5 sections to a driver, from a does not, none, which is in this case does not grow revenue. This is the revenue generation one. Low, moderate, strong, and extreme. So what you need to do is develop the idea of, if you score a project and that project is, in this example, would potentially grow your revenue from new markets and segments by $500,000 to $1 million, that would be considered a moderate selection. So what I would tell you that you're going to be working on is scoring each of your projects based on the information that you're seeing here. And in this one, it's the expand into new markets. So I wanted you to see that depending on what it is you decided these particular items were, this is all about what it is that you'll need to do in order to score your projects, and look at the impact statement of that project on the drivers that you are implementing. Once you have created the number of drivers that you have here and decided which ones are active for right now, you then go into the prioritization of those particular drivers. And when we look at prioritizations literally are, who is it that is going to be the one who says these projects are more important than these other projects. And you're actually going to do that by comparing the drivers. So what's going on here, and you'll see in our example that we have the CIO having run a set of prioritizations of the drivers. The COO has done that same thing. And then there is an executive consensus that could be used in order to run some different selections through the process to decide what is more important than something else as far as projects go. So we're going to go look at the executive consensus, and you'll notice that it starts out in the ribbon. You're seeing that there's define properties, prioritize the drivers, and this is the last item, and it actually starts out here when you have one that's pre-done. And it's telling you that in this particular item, you're seeing that the machine has taken the information that will end up showing you on the prioritized drivers, and it is indicating that increasing market share is the largest priority when you are scoring your projects. So the projects that you're doing, the ones that are more important to your company are ones that increase your market share. Then in expanding into new markets is number 2. Improving customer sat is considerably further down the line at 8%, and the reduce expenses is also down at the bottom. The reality is when you add all these up, that's the 100%. There is, when you're looking here, a consistency ratio that indicates that as I was going through the prioritizations of these items, I was consistent when it came to which drivers were more important. I was actually high on the consistency ratio scale. So that's what we're aiming for. And when I go in and define the priorities, which is actually the first step, you will create this driver prioritization, which is in this case the executive consensus, and we'll move the drivers that are selected from the available drivers, and we'll put them over here on the right side to identify the ones that we want to use when we are working through this next item. And so you'll see up here in the ribbon that first you define the properties, you then prioritize the drivers, and where we actually started out, due to the fact that this one was pre-built, you then review the priorities. You can either use the navigation at the top, or there's a navigation in the bottom corner that indicates next we're going to prioritize the drivers. So if I prioritize the drivers, this is what goes on in prioritizing the drivers. So we take the first driver, which is expand into new markets and segments, and we decide how it plays against the other 3 drivers that we have identified. And what we've indicated here is that we're going to expand into new market segments is more important than improving customer sat, and is less important than increasing market share and is more important than reducing expense base. So as we move through these, it then indicates that we are identifying how these prioritizations work. So now we're on improved customer sat, and what we've indicated is it's much less important than increasing market share and is more important than reducing expense based. And then the last one that we worked on here is increasing the market share is extremely more important than reducing the expense base. So if I go to the review, this is where we ended up starting. This is where the prioritizations are, and this is how we selected what was going on. And now I can go into the portfolio analysis and look at the different portfolio analysis items that I have created and look at what I'm using that these things are looking at. You're either going to look at cost or look at how your resources are being identified and worked through these items, or you're going to look at cost and resources together. So all of these items can be looked at, and creating a new analysis is what we have here. You'll notice all these different analyses that we've looked at this point, and I'll just pick one that was done this year. Let's look at this baseline one. And what ends up going on is that the system allows you to look at the metrics here at the portfolio selection and at what projects are put into the system and automatically adjusted to handle what's going on. This one happens to be analyzing resources. I'd like to do, that's where it came up since we were already finished with it. When I look at the name of the analysis that we're working on, you'll see that what you're doing is prioritizing projects using specific business drivers. And I'm going to say, you notice that the driver selection, the prioritization item that we have here are the three items that we define, the CIO, COO, and executive consensus. So you then decide which projects that you're going to identify to select and try to do some type of analysis on. Now, whether these are all of yours or just some of yours, that is absolutely up to you. So you'll be choosing which projects that you'll want to identify to add to your consent that you're going to be working on. And then you will analyze cost by a custom field that will have been added to each of the projects that, for example, proposal costs or ROI, but proposal cost is typical what you were thinking this proposal or this particular project was going to cost you. You can look at planning horizons and any custom field for resource information. So if you have resource custom fields, which you can see that we have here, maybe it's your RBS, maybe it's what the role is for each of your people who are listed on projects, whichever it is. You can then filter resources as you would like and decide whether you will have not only committed resources, but also proposed resource assignments to be looked at. Again, when you're thinking about resources, when you are not ready for a project to be agreed to as the fact that it is going to be your approved project, you might be having people assigned as proposed resources. And you can decide on whether or not the project start and finishes are from the utilization settings or from custom fields. And as we prioritize the projects, I'm going to the next section. Now you can see what the priority of the different drivers as these particular projects were listed and put into the system in the strategic analysis section of your PDP, your project data item. You will see that these are the selections that were made for each of the particular projects. Now, one of the things that you can do here is, even though I've selected the overall executive consensus item, which would have said these are the way that the people went in and whoever was responsible for scoring the projects decided what they were, you do have the option here to change if you want. For example, currently reduce expense-based when you looked at this wide world importer software R100. You could actually decide, hey, this one should be a low instead of something else, and you could go and modify the items that you're seeing in here. So this is something where just before running the analysis, you can make some modifications to the item so that you can make a choice about what you want and what you think these selections should be. So I'll be showing you where these are typically created when you are looking at your project after we look a little bit further into the system here. So now I'm going to review the priorities, and you'll notice that it's saying, hey, they couldn't save my change because this particular analysis is used in several portfolio selections. So that's all right, not a big deal. It's just saying we can't make a modification. And when I go to the review, here is how all of the projects score when it comes to how someone went in and decided which drivers were most significant within that particular project. So it's really saying that the Bradford Solid Material Laser Scanning System has the highest priority project based on the scoring of the drivers, and the Bell Linguistics Analysis Tool has the lowest priority. So there's two things that we can go look at. As you see in the system, in the ribbon, you'll see the Analyze Cost item and the Analyze Resource item, which is where we ended up when we opened this up. If I look at the Analyze Cost, you'll notice that you can now see the efficient frontier, which is the combination of looking at the strategic value and the cost. So what you're always trying to do is put B on somewhere on this line. The closer to the line you are, the closer the cost and the strategic value is matching up. So what we're seeing here is the baseline information. So in the metrics section, you're seeing proposal costs for all of the projects in the baseline is $3.4 million, almost $3.5 million. You can modify these things. There are currently 12 projects with a strategic value that says, hey, if we had $3.468 million, you could do all of your projects. And you'll notice as you look over in the section for projects that here are the priority listings that you remember seeing before. The fact that these are all forced or all in auto, whether the machine says they're forced in or forced out, and you do have that option. And here are the proposal cost, the benefits, here's the ROI for each one, and you also can see the project type. So if your project type is app dev or whatever it might be, you can see what these are. And you're also seeing what stage of your workflow these are in, if you're using the workflow part of Project Online. So the whole idea is that you're going to build a selection of projects to let you run scenarios to decide which projects you should be working on or which projects you should put your people on. So one of the things that you can do here is go in and say, well, it's not, I don't happen to have this much money. I have $2 million. And if I do that and say 2 million, and recalculate the project, you'll notice that with $2 million, the machine has moved out of the selected projects list, those projects that for whatever reason, based on how you have it selected, how you have the people identified, the benefit and whatnot in the system, these are the projects it's saying you probably want to hold off on if you only have $2 million to spend. So again, one of the things that you can identify are what's going on with your applications in the application dev or your new products or whatever it is, which projects you should be working on to get the best bang for the buck. They also have in the ribbon the ability to look at it from a scatter chart perspective, if that's something that you prefer. And I kind of like the grid. You do have the ability to add summary items to it or save different scenarios. So you'll notice that here are some items that have been saved. So let's go and look in the forced in $1.7 million. So now you're looking at items that have been forced in, and that's in this force in, force out scenario. So now you can see that, hey, because I have to do this particular project, maybe it's a government regulation project or something that you can't get away with not doing. And once you say, I have to do that, rather than letting the machine decide, now all of a sudden you have a completely different look at what projects and where your strategic value is now. Now you're at the lower end of your strategic value. So as we look through some of the different value items and what's appropriate, you can then decide on the scenario and save those items and then commit them as you want to keep it where it is. All right. So I wanted you to see that there are considerable items for you to go look at. What you should be looking at is also the fact that if you go into the projects, and let's go look at one of the projects themselves, in the strategic impact PDP, this is where you actually score the projects that we identified. So as you go in and say, let me edit this project, you'll notice that this one now has a currently no rating, and depending on whether I have the capability or not, I could decide on what this particular project was. This one's a strong, I'm going to make it a strong for customer sat, and low in strategic, in increasing market share, and so on. So when you start saving these things and they then become part of your portfolio analysis, which could easily happen, I wanted you to see that identifying the drivers, the comparison of those drivers, and then the analysis of the projects is what really is all happening for Project Online when you use all of the tools built into the system. And I appreciate everyone looking at this. So have a great day.